Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the App State's Veterinary Technology Speaker Series. My name is Mary Beth McKee. The Veterinary Technology Program launched in fall of 2022, and this speaker series is a way for our team to reach out to the campus and the larger community about important topics within the field. Today, we have Ann Wortinger and Jen Serling, both faculty in App State's Veterinary Technology Program. And just to give you a little background on inspiration, I had asked Ann, I knew she was a big nutrition person, and I said, I have a dog, Tremont, and I need to know if I need to make better choices for my dog. And she was so generous and shared with me many tips. And every time I told someone that story, they said, I'd like to talk to Ann. I'd like to talk to Ann. So that is the impetus for today's talk. So we're looking forward to it. Ann has prepared some notes, and she's going to share those. As participants, if you click the Q&A button, that is a way that you can ask our panelists questions, either Jen or Ann Wortinger. And Ann, let's take it away.
I just want to add, while Ann's getting her slides to share, that Ann actually holds a veterinary technician specialist certification in nutrition. So when you're talking about like the cream of the crop, it's Ann.
Okay, well, one of the things that we as pet owners have to do is to feed our animals. Everybody needs to eat. So as a pet owner, you need to make a decision as to what to feed your pet. Now, luckily for most of our pets, cats and dogs, rabbits, ferrets, the more common things, there are commercially prepared diets. If you walk into any pet store now, you go on to any of the food online companies, the selection is overwhelming. How do you decide what to do? So this is going to introduce you to pet food labels, what they mean, what is on them, and how it can help you guide your decisions. So what is a pet food label? It is a legal document. There are required parts on that food label. They are regulated by AAFCO. We'll discuss about who that is. And they're under the jurisdiction of the FDA. So when we have pet food recalls, those recalls are initiated by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. So AAFCO is the American Association of Feed Control Officials. This sets regulations for pet food labeling and testing for nutritional adequacy. This is for any food that is commercially available in the United States. And they publish a manual, the Bible, yearly. If you are a big regulation geek, which we do have a couple nutrition people that are, you get this Bible. I contact the person I know as the regulation geek to find out what changes have been made. So when a food says that it is complete, what is that telling us? Remember, this is a legal document and there are requirements as to what this means. It means it is nutritionally adequate to feed animals other than man. It is compounded to be fed as a sole ration. So when we look at our diets, if you're going to eat cereal or you're going to eat soup or you're going to eat McDonald's, that is not expected to be your source of food. With a pet food, you open that bag up, it needs to be nutritionally complete. There needs to be no additives that have to be put into it per the government. It needs to be capable of maintaining life and or promoting production. So for our large animals, our chickens, our rabbits, without additional substances except water. So it needs to be complete. So balanced. So we hear that a lot of time. It's complete and balanced. Applied to a diet is a ration or feed having all the required nutrients in the proper amount and proportion. Now that is very important. For those of you that have dogs, the FDA issued a warning in 2018 on certain foods that have been nutritionally linked to causing dilated cardiomyopathy in dogs. Those foods were complete and balanced. But There is a problem with the proportions, and we are still working on what that is. You can go to the FDA definitely for more information. So based on the recommendation of recognized authorities in the field of animal nutrition, these authorities are designated by the government. It isn't somebody out in Midwest Iowa going, I'm an authority in pet nutrition. That isn't how this is designated. We need to look at our target species. So who is this food designed for? And the function must be specified. Is it for growth? Is it for adult maintenance? Is it for all life stages? One thing to keep in mind is there is not a geriatric food, because geriatric requirements can vary. Sometimes they're overweight, sometimes they're underweight, sometimes they have other diseases. So geriatric does not have a designation. So AAFCO regulations, this is what has to be on the label. There has to be a product name. There has to be a net weight. And it is usually in the United States because, you know, we just don't want to be nice. It is going to be in pounds and kilograms or in standard measurement and metric. We need the name and address of the manufacturer. This does not have to be complete. It does not have to be helpful. We will see a couple examples that are not exactly helpful if we needed to contact this manufacturer. A guaranteed analysis. And this is actually going to be changing within the next couple years. New AAFCO regulations are going to go into effect, I think it's next year. A list of ingredients, the intended species, and statement of nutritional adequacy. So is it complete and balanced? Is it for intermittent feeding? Is it for short-term feeding, or a lot of our therapeutic diets for under the supervision of a veterinarian? So location on the label. Not only do we tell you what has to be on it, but where it's going to be on. Now, for the consumer, this makes it easier. We know exactly where to look for things. If the manufacturers had their way, you wouldn't know where to even start checking for things. They've got 4 sides on the bottom, and it could be anywhere. So the principal display panel, that's going to be facing you on the shelf. It's going to have the product identity. It's going to hit the statement of intent and the net weight. So it's going to tell you what species is supposed to be fed for and what life stage it is designed for. Now, optional, they can put a vignette, which is the pretty little pictures, which most pet food companies excel at putting in pretty little pictures. Nutritional claim. So designed for, you know, smooth coat and, you know, hair growth. And burster flag. So new and improved or better tasting, whatever they want to bring your attention to. There is a limit as to how long the new and improved can be listed on a bag, 6 to 9 months. Information panel is going to have our ingredient statement, guaranteed analysis, nutritional adequacy, feeding guidelines, and manufacturer or distributor. Now, optional, the UPC, Universal Product Codes. Those are almost universally found just because that's what point of sales require. Batch information. So if there's a recall, you can go easily check to see if you're the batch being recalled. And freshness date. The freshness date is usually going to be the shortest period rather than the longest period that this food is considered fresh and consumable. Some animals, they don't care, so it doesn't matter. So this is a sample label. This is Dr. K's Natural Food. One of the jokes that we have in veterinary medicine is if we were feeding what nature intended, which is what a lot of the commercials show, no self-respecting cat would ever be able to catch a chicken, bring down a cow, stalk a turkey. So those are not natural diets for a cat, or catch a fish. However, if you were a small bird, if you were a rodent, if you were an insect, you would be the natural diet. We do not have one mouse-based diet on the market. And that is consumer preference, not cat preference. So Dr. K has introduced a natural food for cats. It is field mouse. It is complete and balanced for adult maintenance. So we know off this label, who is it intended for? Cats. That it is complete and balanced, so it's not for supplemental feeding. And what the primary ingredient is. That that is not required, but it can be helpful. We have our ingredient list. Water sufficient for processing. Michigan grown, whole ground, wild field mice. Okay, all that is required is the mouse part. All the rest is editorializing, making it seem better. Are Michigan mice better than Indiana mice? Are they better than North Carolina mice? We don't know. But this manufacturer feels that Michigan mice need to be stressed. So our guaranteed analysis. The guaranteed analysis is going to give you minimums and maximums for the various nutrients. They may be close or maybe not so close to what it is. So this is 20% protein, minimum of 10% fat. Mice are really pretty skinny. Crude fiber, moisture of 65%. Canned foods are going to be usually under 80%, between 75, 80%. AFCO feeding studies substantiate complete and balanced food for adult maintenance. All foods must put down how they have gotten their AFCO certification. We have the manufacturer, and we actually have a phone number to reach them. So that's a bonus. And our feeding recommendations. Now, this is based on weight. Do I know what the activity is for this animal? Do I know what the sexual status is for this animal? Do I know if I'm feeding multiple cats, how I'm going to feed it? No. So the feeding recommendations, I usually do not pay any attention to because my animals are indoor, my animals are adequate body condition. So they're just basing this on their weight and none of the other information that we need from the animals. So our principal display panel, that we're going to see right up front, defined by the Food and Drug Administration as the part of the label that is most likely to be displayed, presented, shown, or examined under customary conditions of display for retail. So that is exactly how the stores are setting them up. They're not going to put the packages on end where all you see is the ingredient labels. They're going to put them so you see the pretty name and the pretty pictures. This is the primary means of attracting the consumer's attention. And admit it, when you go down the food aisles, what are you looking for? When I would ask clients, what are they feeding? The blue bag on the second shelf in the back of the store. That's how they find it. That doesn't tell me anything about what they're feeding. So a lot of times I will get a book out and we'll start looking through to see what is a blue bag. Or now the husband who's in the room will call the wife who buys the food to find out what they're feeding. This should immediately communicate the product identity. Is it for cats? Is it for dogs? Is it for rabbits? Is it for puppies? Is it for kittens? So that there is minimal chances of errors being made. With that being said, the number 2 food sold in the United States is Purina Puppy Chow. I can guarantee you we do not have that many puppies in the United States. So people can buy things that are not appropriate for their pets, as long as the product is labeled correctly. So our product identity, the primary means of identification by the consumer. So that's going to be this part. Must include the product name, the brand, and the manufacturer. This food is no longer manufactured, but it's a really pretty picture, so I keep using it. So the brand name. Now we have so many manufacturers of pet foods right now. This is the name by which pet food products for a given company are identified. So that is going to be Purina. That is going to be Blue Buffalo. That is going to be Signature. What is the main product company for that? So this provides information about the individual product within a particular brand. For example, Purina, our manufacturer, Dog Chow is our product. And it comes in dry and canned. So we're getting dry. The information you would send to somebody to the store to buy this food. So species must identify on the principal display panel what species this is intended for. Cat and dog. We're not going to put down their Latin names. We're not going to put down a number of species. It's manufactured one species. That's all it's approved for. Now, there are foods that we have the species and a breed designation. So there are a number of companies that will make foods designed for French bulldogs or for miniature poodles or for golden retrievers. Based on their research, they have found differences between what these different breeds need and have manufactured to that line. That does not mean that those breeds cannot eat any other food. This is intended to help guide consumer purchases. Sometimes the companies offer a little more than just guidance. This does not indicate that the food may or may not be fed to an alternate species. So one of the things that we see commonly is for ferrets. There are not a whole lot of commercial ferret foods, but what you'll find in a lot of ferret groups is recommendations for certain cat foods to be fed to ferrets. The FDA is not going to allow on the packaging for cats and ferrets. That's not going to be allowed, but they can be fed to alternate species. There is no government agency that's going to come after you because you bought a food and fed it to another species. Or in Miss Jen's case, her cat eating the dog food. So a designator or statement of intent. So this is used to identify the species for which the food is intended. So dog, cat, puppy, kitten, any of those. So this food is for canine. And we have a very good graphic of a dog so that we know. Now this food is actually a veterinary therapeutic diet. So we are going to put canine instead of dog because we assume most veterinary professionals are going to know what canine is. So our net weight. We do have this in the United States presented as both metric and standard measure. So this indicates the amount of food in a specific container, whether it is canned or dry, doesn't matter. Can be given in pounds or grams, must be placed within the bottom third of the front display panel. So for this label, it is right down here, 14 ounces or 397 grams. If I need to calculate how many calories are in an ounce or how many calories are in a gram, then I need to know how much is in the container. And that is something I'm going to do, probably not you. So product vignette or pictures. They should not misrepresent the contents by looking better than the actual product or ingredients. Now, we've all looked at microwave dinners and what it has on the cover and what it is when you serve it are not always the same, but they should be close. You should be able to at least see some chunks of chicken in there or see some, primavera sauce. Should be at least close in there. And this refers to any vignette, graphic, or pictorial representation of a product on a label. So for this one, we can have a bowl of dog food with the food in question. We cannot have the Chihuahua with killer on its bowl. So our nutritional claim, this is what causes a lot of problems. So we need to have complete and nutritious, 100% nutritious, complete nutrition, or similar statements. What we've got highlighted up here, this product is formulated to meet the nutritional levels established by AAFCO Dog and Food Content Profile for Adult Dogs. So that tells us what species and what life stage. Must be substantiated by a nutritional adequacy claim. These are established by AAFCO. And there are a couple ways that companies can substantiate this. We will cover that once we get through all the panels here. So our information panel, the FDA defines this as that part of the label immediately contiguous and to the right of the principal display panel. So take your bag, rotate it, and it's that panel. This contains additional product information. So this is a canned food, our principal display panel. This is immediately to the right. And this is our information panel. It's going to tell us our AAFCO claim. It's going to give our guaranteed analysis. It's going to give our ingredients. If there's any special considerations once it's opened, and our packing and distributor. So ingredients. First off, the thing I want to emphasize here is the body does not care about ingredients. It cares about nutrients. It does not care if meat is the first ingredient. It does not care about whether carrots and blueberries are in there. It cares about the nutrients. And that's the only thing you need to remember. When I start looking at an ingredient panel, I don't even look at the first 4 or 5 ingredients. Because what I want to look for is actually prebiotic fibers. Personal interest, that's what I need for my animals. But don't let somebody telling you that you need to know what the ingredients are and comparing one food's ingredients to another food's ingredients. That is not important. So ingredients are arranged in decreasing order by weight. You're not able to highlight one single ingredient, but you can manipulate them. No indicator of ingredient quality. So just because it says it has a certain ingredient in there doesn't mean it's a better quality food. Splitting of ingredients is allowed. I'll explain what that is in a bit. Dry ingredients appear lower on the list than moister ingredients such as meat. This is based on weight. So something that has a high water content to it, it's going to be higher on the ingredient list, but may not have a larger volume in the food. Additives, antioxidants, minerals, and vitamins are also required. They're usually the last things on the list because they're small amounts. So what isn't included? The quality of the ingredients used is not included on the ingredient list. This can only be determined by digestibility studies. Amino acid content and bioavailability. Knowing how the food behaves in the animal's guts is what we need to know. Mineral availability or binding can affect how a food is available in amounts of non-digestible materials. Now that can be vitamins and minerals, it can be fibers, and even non-digestible fibers are required by the body. This is commonly seen in foods that claim to be the same as another higher priced product. Don't look at just a comparison of the ingredient list. Now, I like generics just as much as the next person. My husband, when he goes to the grocery store, it would kill him to buy a name brand, especially if the ingredients are the same. That doesn't mean necessarily that the quality is going to be the same, that the research behind it is the same. It just means they've lined them all up to the same amount. One of the things I like to use as a comparison, I live outside Metro Detroit. So if we had a Chevrolet and we had a Cadillac, they all have 4 tires, 4 seats, and a steering wheel, right? They may all have 4 cylinders. But does that mean that the quality of the Chevrolet is going to be the same as the quality of the Lincoln? Not necessarily. You can have better quality tires, better quality seats, better quality steering wheels. In Michigan, they may be heated. Just because they have the same things does not mean the quality is the same. So you found out what my soapbox is here. So splitting of ingredients. Everybody does it. Doesn't make it right, doesn't make it wrong. It is a manipulation, and everybody does it. Occurs when several different forms of the same product is used. For example, we can have wheat germ, wheat middlings, wheat bran, and wheat flour. They're all from the same grain of wheat. It's just how we fractionate it out. This allows products to be placed lower on the ingredient list and allows a more desirable ingredient to be placed higher on the list. One of the other things that we will commonly see is things listed as byproducts. The consumer perception is that byproducts are lower quality than meat. Byproducts is a specific definition by the FDA and is required to be used, and includes things that vary extensively in quality. It can include liver, spleen, blood, lungs, brain, and just cuttings off of standard meat. Nutritionally, liver, spleen, and lungs are going to be much more nutritionally complete than muscle meat is. So byproducts, depending on what they're made of, may actually be better quality, better digestibility than what we're going to get with muscle meat. So why split ingredients? Because we can. We are required to list ingredients by weight. I want to make something look better, so I'm going to split the ingredients. Nobody says I can't. Drier ingredients will appear lower. Meat products, because the perception is that a high meat diet is better quality, will appear higher. It's allowed. Just be aware of it when you're looking at the label. So when we look at the guaranteed analysis, this will represent the worst case scenario of what this food can be. Indicates only minimums and maximums. So minimum crude protein, minimum crude fat, maximum crude fiber, and maximum moisture. You will get other things added into the guaranteed analysis. This is not restrictive. You can put other things in there. You just got to equal. I mean, obviously that will not equal 100%, but with the other things in, it might. So guaranteed what? Crude protein is an estimate of the total protein in the food. An estimate. It is giving you what the minimum is, but we don't know what the maximum is. It's usually going to be close because protein's expensive. This provides the quantity of protein, but not the quality of protein. Crude fat is an estimate of the lipid contents. And remember, lipids include solids and liquid fats. Organic fiber, this is the residue remaining after a plant material has been excreted. All animals require fiber. And more importantly, the bacteria that reside in their intestinal tract require fiber. And when they digest that fiber, they make energy for that animal. So fiber is not just a filler. It has a purpose in the animal's intestinal tract. Moisture, canned foods can be up to 78%. If they're above that, then they are no longer canned. They may be a gravy, they may be some other condiment, but they're not designated as canned food. And dry foods are typically 6 to 10%, could be up to 12%, depends on the type of food that it is. So nutritional adequacy statements. Mentioned this a couple times. So complete and balanced for all life stages, or maybe a limited claim for puppies, for kittens, for adult maintenance only, intermittent or supplemental use. You're usually going to find that on treats. And then therapeutic diets. Therapeutic diets do not need to meet AAFCO recommendations because they're going to be fed under the guidance of a veterinarian who is checking to make sure that that animal is remaining healthy and the food is doing what it needs to be doing. So this is our nutritional adequacy statement. It will always be to the right of the principal display panel in the information panel. It may be at the top, it may be at the bottom, but it's required to be on that panel. So method used to get the nutritional adequacy claim. This is the other big thing. AAFCO feeding trials are the gold standard. And what has happened is the company has taken a minimum of 6 animals, 6, and fed, or 8 animals, and fed this food to them for 6 months. If it is an adult maintenance, then it just needs to be adult animals. If it is for puppies and kittens or licensed for reproduction, then it needs to be a pregnant animal that takes the puppies or kittens to weaning. My feeling is that if I'm going to be feeding a food to my animals, I want to know that the company has put the time and money in to verify that this food is nutritionally complete using feeding trials. If you won't feed it to 8 animals, then why should I find out that the food is not nutritionally adequate on my patients or my pets? That is just my belief. You can also do nutrient levels calculated by a laboratory. After production, this food is sent out, they break it down and analyze it. The problem with that is, do we know how that food performs in that animal's guts? We don't. The only way to know what digestibility is, what absorption is to do a feeding trial. Or we can take the handy dandy food chart and say, I put a cup of corn in here. It's got this many calories and has this much protein and carbohydrates. Now, the problem with that is depending on where you sourced that corn, maybe the chart you're using is for Idaho, and the corn you're sourcing is from the mountains of North Carolina. Is that going to be the same? Maybe, maybe not. But we also don't know what's going to happen during processing. Are some nutrients made more available or less available? And what happens with the digestion? All 3 of these methods meet the AAFCO requirements. So what we want to do is to check on our label to see how that food got its AAFCO certification. Now, we talked about feeding guidelines on our mouse diet. They are required on all foods labeled as complete and balanced for all life stages. Directions must be in common terms. So they're not going to tell you to feed 54 grams because most people in the United States don't have a gram scale that they're going to use to measure out the food. So it's typically going to be in standard measure, either a half a can or a half a cup, something that's easily obtained. General use is not specified. I don't know if this animal goes out and runs with the owner every day. I don't know if this animal sleeps on the couch all day. Those are going to be significantly different food requirements. We don't know if these animals are spayed and neutered. We know that once an animal is spayed and neutered, their nutritional requirements go down by 25%, almost immediately. So feeding instructions for snappy dog food, 1 can per 10 pounds of body weight per day. That's a pretty big amount and would make our beagle very, very happy. Up to 30 pounds, and then 1 can for each additional 15 pounds of body weight. Okay, we are going to have happy beagles. Manufacturer, distributor, or dealer. This is required. It does not have to be helpful. This is usually found on the information panel. The best manufacturers are going to include the most information. Also does not indicate if the food is a fixed or variable feed formula. That is more important if you're looking at the higher quality foods. So our Snappy Dog food is packed by Foster Canning in Napoleon, Ohio, 43545. Am I going to be able to get a hold of Foster Canning? Well, I can try to Google it. Google may or may not have more information. Or for information, I can call toll free. They give me the times, what area they're in, Monday through Friday. They give me an address, complete. Who do you think I'm going to be able to get information from if I have a question on this food? So other items are universal product codes. We're all used to the barcodes by this point in time. They are not legally required, but are included. You want to make it easier for the store to sell your food. Batch numbers, date of manufacture, and freshness dating. Those are all required so that if there is a recall or there is a problem with that food, we can very easily go back and check. With the batch numbers, every time a cycle of food is run through the machine, it is assigned a batch number. So we know that on March 1st, batch number 3123 was run that day. In most companies, I won't say most companies, some companies will save an example of that batch, put it in the freezer. If there is a problem, then they can pull it back out and find out exactly what's going on. So this is a request from Mary Beth that she wanted me to address treats. There's a reason for this. Everybody does it. I am sure there is not one pet owner out there that doesn't have treats. And in my house, we have tube treats, we have crunchy treats, we have pill pockets because I've got older animals and making sure that I can medicate them so they get treats, or they get their pill pockets as treats so I can medicate them. It's important to remember there are no free calories. You can't feed the recommended amount of food and then add extra treats and not expect the pet to get overweight. Treats should not be more than 10% of the entire caloric intake. When you look at milk bones, the little itty bitty milk bones are 10 calories. If you are feeding 10 of those, that could be your dog's entire caloric allotment if they are only a 7-pound dog. And there is no government regulation for treats. This is kind of the free market. You can label and sell anything you want as a treat because it is not covered by AAFCO. So what are appropriate treats? Hey, we want to make sure we're giving something that's good. I want to remind you that what dogs and cats like and what is good for them are not necessarily the same thing. Think toddlers. Okay? What the toddler wants and what the toddler can have, not the same. So most dry cookie type treats, those were actually the first types of pet food that were manufactured were biscuits and cookies. The soft, moist commercial treats, so pill pockets, Pounce treats, any of the chewy dog treats, and the soft tube treats. One of the things we use very commonly in veterinary medicine is the churro treats, because cats and a lot of dogs think that they are past awesome, and they allow us to do things that we might not have gotten away with without using a little incentive. So maybe not so good. I know this is going to come as a shock, but bones are not appropriate treats. Processed, unprocessed, if they're cooked, they're even worse because they will splinter, and we either one, have a bone get stuck, or two, have a bone perforate somewhere along that very long and complicated digestive tract. And if either one of those things happen, you are looking at a very expensive surgery. And this includes all cooked bones, chickens, beef, pork, any of them. Unprocessed bones. The problem with unprocessed bones is bacteria really like to grow on unsterilized, unprocessed food items. And most dogs do not finish a bone off in the same day. So it's left there to collect things off the floor. Rawhide chews. How many recalls have we seen in the past couple years for rawhide chews, specifically from shipped in from foreign countries that have contamination, that are, the contamination can be arsenic, that can be lead, it can be bacteria, not an appropriate choice. Uncooked animal parts. I can't tell you how many times I've taken students into pet stores for anatomy lessons. Okay, so we're selling an esophagus here. Let's count the rings on this esophagus. We've got cow hooves, we've got pig hooves, we've got horse hooves, we've got goat horns, we've got just all sorts of things. These products aren't even qualified to be in pet food, but people are buying them and thinking they're appropriate for the animals to eat. And we have the same problem that we have with the bones, that if there's any hard parts, they can get stuck. But they also are just a growing media for bacteria. You don't know how these were processed. You don't know how these were collected. The animals may love them. That does not make it correct. Any raw meat, for the same reason, nutrient imbalances and bacterial contamination. But when we start talking raw meat, we can also look at possible parasitic infections that parasites in cyst make eggs in meat and body parts. When we cook them, we kill them. When we don't cook them, they are not killed and they can infect our animals. Milk or dairy products, and that's primarily due to lactose intolerance, and it is a dose-dependent thing. In cats, the calculation is 5 mLs per kilogram of body weight is safe. It depends on the animal. Fatty human foods. So we discourage feeding of human foods, but specifically letting the dog or cat clean your plate because you've eaten all the nutritious parts of that food and you've left the butter that was on the vegetables, the salt and pepper that was in the meat, and all the fatty trimmings for them to eat. That is looking to cause pancreatitis, whether it is short-term or long-term. Spoiled or moldy foods, obviously not a good idea. And raw bread dough. Dogs have an affinity for raw bread dough. They don't eat just a little bit of it, they eat a lot of it. And yeast in the bread dough reacts to the increased body temperature in the dog's body, and that yeast can expand, and it causes two things. Produces alcohol, and it also can produce an obstruction. It cannot move out of the stomach. And so your dog eating a loaf of rising dough on the counter just earned an emergency trip to the doctor. That may or may not result in surgery. So why do we do treats? One, we love our animals. We want to let them know that we love them. I buy my husband candy. I don't buy my husband candy because he needs it. I buy him because he likes it. So we want to make sure we're feeding the right amount of treats, less than 10% of the total calories, the right type, and at the right time. Treats that are given just because you're cute are reinforcing things to that animal. Animals do an amazing job of training us. We don't do quite a good enough job at training them. So that is my spiel. We have 15 minutes still for any questions that you might have. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Okay,
So if you guys have any questions for Ann, you can absolutely place them in the Q&A box, and then we can read them out. Oh, good. Okay, so first question, is it better for a food to have a vet recommended label? And how do you know which foods have quality ingredients or contain the best source of nutrition?
Well, let me go back to screen share because I didn't share the really important thing, which is the next slide. So this is resources. It is in the notes, so don't worry about it. WSAVA is the World Small Animal Veterinary Association, and they have a global nutrition toolkit. This provides a lot of information to both pet owners, but also veterinarians. The Pet Nutrition Alliance, Dare to Ask. So this was developed by actually technicians. It is a website where you can type in what food you're looking at, and it will tell you if it meets WSAVA guidelines. WSAVA guidelines require that the food has gone through feeding trials, that it is complete and balanced, that the company employs a veterinary nutritionist or a PhD nutritionist, and that they do regular research on their food. And I can guarantee you the majority of foods do not meet those 4 simple requirements. AVMA Nutrition Matters is also a good source of information for basic nutrition. Hopefully that answers that question. This is my faux Abyssinian, Handsome Jack, showing me just what a bad cat he can be.
We've got lots of good questions coming in. Next one is, how do we know whether AAFCO with AFCO feeding test protocols were used?
It will say specifically on the label, this food meets AFCO requirements through the use of feeding trials. It'll say feeding trials on there. If it does not, it was some other way that they got the nutritional adequacy.
Next one is, do you have any recommendations for feeding a raw diet? They have a 7-year-old bull mastiff.
Raw is not recommended by the AVMA, the AAFP, or the ACVIM nutrition diplomates. There is no recommendations for raw food diets.
So there's 2 questions on, what is your take on making your own dog or cat food to feed your pet, or finding the best recipes for homemade food?
If you decide that you want to make a homemade diet, you need to, 1, contact a veterinary nutritionist, and 2, follow the formula. Diet drift is where we start substituting because the dogs need a change or the owners aren't able to get a specific ingredient, and then it's no longer complete and balanced. There is a company that is run by a veterinary nutritionist called balanceit.com. He will formulate a diet for you, but you have to remember that there is no formulated homemade diet, recipe or otherwise, that can be balanced without adding mineral and vitamin supplements. Dr. Delaney's company is designed to provide you those supplements. So he will make you the diet, and then you have to purchase the supplements. There are also, under the AAVN, there are specific nutritionists who do homemade diet formulations for clients. Don't wing it.
Next one is science diet foods have a significant amount of grain, even in the cat foods. Is this okay for obligate carnivores?
Yes. Those food are complete and balanced and have gone through feeding trials. And it's important to remember that grains are also an excellent source of proteins, fats, and fibers. It is not just carbohydrates. And as somebody who grew up in the Midwest, I love corn. I love corn in all its forms. It is an excellent source of protein. It is just below the meats. And when combined with especially legumes and peas, as most vegetarians will know, we combine our grains with our legumes and peas, then we form a complete protein profile.
Kind of along the same lines, can you discuss the debate of grain-free versus with grains, specifically for dogs? What is the best resource for owners to use in determining how to feed your dog?
The current recommendation is to not feed grain-free to dogs at all. The FDA has issued a statement on dilated cardiomyopathy being associated with grain-free and boutique and exotic diets. This recall absolutely breaks my heart. People are making what they feel is the best choice for their animals. And in many cases, these animals are diagnosed after they die. That if you want to feed a grain-free diet, I would only feed it from foods that meet with SAVA guidelines. And those would be foods manufactured by Hills, Purina, Royal Canin, Iams, and Eukanuba. Those are the only foods I would feed if you need to feed grain-free. If you have an animal with a food allergy, it is not going to be to the grains. It's going to typically be to the proteins. And if that is the case, then you need to get to a therapeutic diet.
And Anne, correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I understand is actually there's very few animals that have an allergy to the grains. It's to other things. Mm-hmm. And that's why grain-free diets are so controversial, because they don't really actually need a grain-free diet.
No. As we discussed with corn, there are specific nutrients that grains provide. Less than 1% of animals that have endoscopy performed for diarrhea or vomiting are found to have an allergic component to that. And 90% of the time of those 1%, it is to a protein in the diet. So whether it's to chicken, to beef, to milk, to eggs, whatever. And those are the ones that we've got verification of what they are allergic to. I have never seen a verified grain allergy in an animal in 40 years.
Yeah. This kind of goes along the same lines. And I sympathize. Both my dog and my cat are allergic to poultry products, so I have to be very picky in what I feed them. So how do you address allergies in dog food? For example, chicken seems to be in everything.
It can be. If you are looking at, if you've got a diagnosed allergy, your chances of being able to manage it over the counter is extremely difficult, because for limited ingredient diets that are sold over the counter, the equipment does not need to be cleaned and disinfected and have all traces of protein removed from the last food that ran through it. It also does not need to be sectioned off from where other foods are being manufactured, where you may get cross-contamination. So just because it says that it only has one protein and only has 2 carbohydrate sources, that doesn't mean that there's not external contamination during the manufacturing process. If you need to feed a limited ingredient diet, therapeutic diets are what are recommended, because the machines are going to be cleaned and disinfected. We know there's no cross-contamination. We also know that they've gone through feeding trials and that they don't have whatever you're trying to avoid. That's the best bet. If you suspect your animal has a food allergy, you can try an over-the-counter food. I would not go grain-free. There are a number of diets that are made for sensitive skin and stomachs. They have increased fatty acids in them primarily that help address any inflammatory responses that those animals may be exhibiting. And a lot of the animals that have allergies, they're environmental. It's not to food. Grasses and trees and pollen are everywhere and you can't avoid it. I'm an asthmatic. I'm allergic to cats and dogs, but I'm also allergic to all the trees and grasses that are found in Michigan that I can control what my animals are exposed to. I can't control the trees and pollen at all.
Oh boy, we're getting lots of questions coming in. What is the best time to switch a dog over to senior dog food? Neutral label for senior dry dog food says 7+ years. Curious on your take.
As I said before, there is no geriatric life stage through AFCO. So it really depends on the animal. If you've got a spry 12-year-old dog that is still going out on walks, is behaving fine, and is not having any other problems, keep them on their maintenance diet they're happy with. If you have an animal that at 6 is starting to have arthritic changes and is starting to have other problems, then maybe transitioning them to a higher or lower calorie geriatric diet would be appropriate. That would definitely be something I would discuss with your veterinary team when they go in for their yearly exams.
So also along that same lines, is there any supplements good for arthritis in a cattle dog mixed breed besides glucosamine?
Glucosamine and chondroitin is our primary one because it is looking at supplementing something that the joint fluid tends to thin out and does not provide the cushioning that it usually would. And the glucosamine and chondroitin we know do enter into the joint capsules and does help thicken up that joint fluid. So that is one of our primary recommendations. Anything above that is going to have to be prescribed by a veterinarian.
One of the questions is, and maybe I'll read one question, and something was, could you please mention the list of companies again and why are you recommending them? So maybe you could put that slide up while you answer another question.
Sure, let me go back. There we go. So WASABA has got guidelines that they see as minimum guidelines for all manufacturers of pet food. The only companies that meet those guidelines are Hills, Science Diet, Purina, all product lines, Royal Canin, which also includes Iams and Eukanuba. Those are the only foods that are doing feeding trials on all their foods, that do active research on their product lines, that the 3 minimum requirements I want from a food. They do feeding trials, they do active research, and they support my profession. So for most of us, we have CE requirements to maintain our licensure. Because of my veterinary technician specialties, I have additional CE requirements. I'm required to do 30 hours of CE per year between my state and my VTS requirements. I get a lot of that is free CE through the food companies, and it isn't always CE that is food related. It may be GI related, it may be allergy related, it can be lots of different things. So a company that does research to improve what they are offering our pets instead of copying somebody else. So that's what I look for in a food. Check the WASABA guidelines. You can check Dare to Compare. If it's not one of those 3 brands of companies, they're not going to have done feeding trials.
All right, 3 more questions. Yep. I've been told it's important to rotate my dog's food, but anytime I begin switching her from a fish-based diet to any other meat-based, she gets sick. What would you suggest?
If it's complete and balanced, it does not need to be rotated. Those are old recommendations. If they're happy on the food, they're doing well on the food, you can keep them on the food.
What are your thoughts on freeze-dried or dehydrated meat training treats to be given during training sessions only?
I would go with freeze-dried over frozen, though both of them can have bacterial contamination. So that is something to be concerned with. I know we want to use high value treats during training. Make sure it's not more than 10% of the calories. I would go with freeze dried over the other ones.
All right, last question. This is a good one to end on too, because I think a lot of people are curious about this. So dog loves vegetables. Is it wrong to give raw vegetables such as carrots, squash, potatoes, apples, green beans?
Nope, that's perfectly fine. We have to remember that the structure of dog teeth does not allow for the grinding that we do with our vegetables. But if they like it, it's not going to hurt anything. It'll break down in the intestines. Good source of fiber, good source of nutrients, as long as it's not greater than 10%. There are a couple fruit and vegetable items that dogs should not eat. Onions, garlic, avocados, and green tomatoes are the big ones. So if your dog's a green tomato stealer out of the garden, I would encourage you to restrict their access. That can cause some problems in the long run. And yeah, onions and garlic are, so if you're salting with onion powder or garlic powder, don't give it to your animals.
And that's on the questions, Anne. This was amazing.
An hour of nutrition on a Friday morning. Best way to get my day off.
Fabulous. I could listen to you all day.
All right. Thanks everyone for coming. We appreciate it. And this recording will, as soon as we get things set up, it will appear on our website. So feel free to contact me, Mary Beth McKee, McKeemb at appstate.edu, if you want some of the links that were covered today or to know exactly when the recording's up. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks everybody for coming.